Blog Talk Radio.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday evening of the Masters edition of Golf Talk Live. Welcome, everybody, and glad you could join us here. Got a great show for you tonight. Of course, I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and joining me here in just a few moments, I have the honor of two great golf professionals, Alison Curdt and Clint Wright are going to be joining me here, and I'll tell you just a little bit about them in a second. And then a little bit later in the broadcast, I'm going to be joined by Byron Casper, son of legendary Billy Casper, on the special Masters edition of Golf Talk Live. Thank you for joining me. Let me just remind everybody, of course, we are live from 6 to 8 p.m. Central tonight. That's 7 to 9 on the East Coast, and that would be 4 to 6 for you under Pacific time. If you want to call in anytime during the live broadcast, you're welcome to do so. The number to call is area code 646-716-4667. We'd love to hear from you and get your predictions on who's going to win the tournament this weekend. Also, just to remind everybody, if you're looking to find us, obviously if you're here tonight, you know how to get a hold of us. But for those of you that are a little kind of sketchy on this, go to blogtalkradio.com and up in the search key type Golf Talk Live, and that will take you to the main page. And always on the live broadcast, the current show is always at the top. But for some reason, if you're not able to join us during the live broadcast, you can scroll down a little bit into the on-demand section. And, of course, as I've mentioned many times before, the programs are all auto-recorded after the live broadcast, and you can listen to them at your leisure. But you don't want to miss tonight. We've got lots of great stuff to talk about. And we're going to be unveiling a little bit later on when Byron joins me. We're going to be unveiling a contest, a Majors Champion contest for couples here on the show, and giving you a great opportunity to win a really, really great prize and a little trip to Southern California. And we'll talk about that as the evening progresses. But in the meantime, let me bring on my guests that are waiting very patiently here. First up, of course, is Alison Curdt. She's a PGA Master Professional as well as an LPGA Professional in instruction. She's the Director of Instruction at the Wood Ranch Golf Club, and she's also a marriage and family therapist registered intern. And she was the 2012 LPGA Teacher and Club Professionals Western Teacher of the Year. She's also TPI certified, and she's featured instructor on the Golf Channel's Swing Fix. And right alongside, of course, is my good buddy, Mr. Clint Wright. He's a 30-year member of the PGA, as well as a partner at TGM Golf, and he's a big proponent, as I've mentioned many times, of the R3 approach, and certainly one of my favorite guests here on Golf Talk Live. Alison, Clint, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Well,
thanks, Ted. Looking forward to talking.
I appreciate. Yeah, I'm going to shut up now and give you guys a chance to do some talking here in a moment. But thank you very much. And I know obviously everybody wants to sort of be glued to their television, here on Masters Week, and especially the first night to see how things are going to go. So let's just talk a couple of things. You were mentioning off air. A couple of things. First off, of course, if you've been tuning into the Masters today, especially here lately, you see that Jordan Spieth is leading the tournament. That's, of course, last year's winner of the Masters. He's currently, Clint, I think you said he's 6 under?
Yeah, well, he finished 6 under with 66. That's right.
Right. So he's got a good lead, if you will, going into tomorrow's round. And then also we had not so good news for Mr. Ernie Els. He finished, and you corrected me here. I originally heard it was a 10 on the scorecard for hole number 1, but it was I guess dropped down to a 9. So he finished, I believe you said, with an 80, correct?
That's correct. He shot 80. I'm not real sure
right.
what the details were. They just announced that they miscounted or something. I don't know. Right.
And that brings me to really the first question that I want to ask both of you. And Clint, I'm going to let you start first, just to sort of follow up on that. But obviously, there's a lot of preparations coming into a major, physically, mentally, and emotionally? I'm going to let each of you take a stab at that. Some come better prepared than others. What are some of the things that the players need to do to prepare for this major? Clint?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I think there's 80 something players in the tournament. It's the smallest field of any major, and they all come different. I mean,
right.
I think they all have their own way of getting prepared. You've got just going down the leaderboard, you've got all the old guys like me that are playing because they're past champions that are
right.
They're trying to do the best they can. They know they're most likely not going to be in contention to win. They have different goals, maybe make the cut, play well. Then you got the guys, the amateurs that have only, their first time. They have to prepare different. I mean, I think obviously it's a mixed bag on how they prepare, and certainly, trying to play their way into contention or play themselves into playing conditions for the first major of the year is huge for these guys. Particularly for the McElroys and the people that are the major tournaments is what matter to them. It's like the World Series. I mean, it's really what they focus on, and it's obvious with Speak shooting the best round he shot all year.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's been just chomping at the bits to get out there and play, and to have a good finish like that to the first day of the Masters certainly is going to be good for his confidence. Alison, let me throw the question to you, Alison, real quick here. If you were working with a golf player that was heading, and it could be professional or amateur, doesn't really matter. What thoughts would you want to sort of put in their head in preparation, and what are some things physically that you would want them to do to prepare for an important tournament like this?
I think first of all to get out and past the labels that are put on this tournament. It's the biggest tournament of the year. It's the Masters. There's so much history.
Right.
All of these different scripts and stories can really start to play havoc on a player's mind, and they get so caught up into this meaning of the tournament, and they lose sight of what their job at hand is, and that is to put the golf ball at their intended target. So if I had a player that was either playing in the Masters or prepping for a big tournament, there would definitely be a plan in place, more of like a 90-day to 6-month plan for how to prep for this sort of type of tournament. And obviously less skill would be emphasized right before the tournament, and more playing and creativity and mental approaches would be emphasized. So I would have a player who, if they had the opportunity to see the golf course ahead of time, such as playing Augusta, or they've maybe played it a couple years in a row, to do a lot of prep work, visualizing what they would do on site, everything from how they would get to the locker to the range, how would they approach the first tee, what do the crowds look like, to really create like an in vivo experience to sort of desensitize themselves, if they will, for the shock when they get there. And I think that because there's so much talk, there's so much publicity about this particular tournament, Masters, that it's really easy to get caught up into all of that. And oftentimes really great players and very skilled players have some failures because they might have a poor mental state for that particular tournament. I would really suggest that players that are prepping for big tournaments come up with a plan, 90 days at least out, for how you want to get prepared for it, and to do a lot of work mentally on the game, seeing how they want to perform and believing when they get there that they can match that performance as they do in their normal practice schedule.
Yeah, well said. How big? And again, you both welcome to chime in on this. Clint, I'll let you sort of lead on this one here, and then Alison, by all means, feel free to jump in. But how big are emotions going to play on this weekend? Alison kind of touched a little bit about this with all the hype that comes in. Being quote unquote the biggest tournament of the year, first major, that sort of thing. But how big of an effect are players' emotions going to be coming into this tournament, Clint?
Well, it's obvious. It's huge. I mean, that for years, they talked about how Nicklaus was a better, the best player and he certainly was the best player. He wasn't necessarily the best ball striker, but he had the ability to control his emotions when it counted. I mean, that's what it comes down to. You put these guys out there just in a day-to-day event, and they're going to knock the flag down all day.
Yeah.
And the emotions are obviously going to change their body. So it is the key factor. I think Alison just pointed out it's the emotional build-up to even 90 days out, how you're approaching, how you're going to control your emotions, and when you get there. And not only is this the first major, but some of these guys, the only major they'll play in. Particularly some of the amateurs, some of these guys, maybe they're not qualified for the U.S. Open, or they don't qualify for the PGA. It may be the only one they play in this year. So it's a huge event, obviously, for all the players. But the emotions, they're all good ball strikers, it's obvious. If they're in a tournament, they're the best 90 players in the world. So the winner of this event, really to any major event, and even maybe on any event on the tour, is going to be the person that strikes the ball well and controls their ability to play at that particular moment in time. Do they have enough emotional stability to have faith in their ability right now? Not next week, not last week, but right now. And how they manage that is going to determine the winner. I mean, you're not watching. I'm sitting here watching it as we're going. The guy that's hit the ball the closest to the hole is Shane Lowry. He ain't made a putt in the last 3 holes, and he didn't have anything more than 10 feet.
Right.
So he's striking the ball, but it's just not going in. So you'll see. I mean, you watch the interview of Jason Day after the round today, and you'll see the emotions.
Yeah.
He blew 5 shots on the last 3 holes, and you can tell.
And that's going to certainly affect his demeanor going into tomorrow. Alison, let me ask you this. You know, we touched a little bit on Ernie Els. You know, going through his mind, you know, right out of the gate, he's scored a 9 on the first hole. You know, as I understand it from what I heard in the media, you know, he got on the green, was looking at making par from, you know, 2 feet or less, and ends up, you know, getting a few other strokes, basically slapping it back and forth until and scoring a 9. That's got to affect him emotionally, and that's going to affect his confidence. What would you say to a player that's had that experience in order to re-energize him to going into tomorrow?
Well, I would say after the round, you definitely want to process it and see what are some pieces that they could have done better. So I didn't particularly see that hole or the coverage of it, so I don't know if he engaged in his pre-shot routine, if he used some techniques to manage his emotions better, if he maybe skipped any of those steps and let emotion overwhelm him and he became sort of a victim to it instead of being able to control and manage himself better. We don't know. But if I had a player that came off the golf course that started off with a 9, had maybe a couple of double bogeys or bogeys as they finished up, and that last scar was really prominent in their mind. There's a couple of techniques that I can certainly work with a golfer through a clinical setting with one of the techniques I use is called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And so when an athlete has a pretty traumatic experience, such as, you know, getting a 9 on the first hole, it's going to stay in their memory bank, and their body is going to continue to experience it. And so we want that athlete to be able to process and consolidate that memory as quickly as possible so that it doesn't bleed into the next day. So I would probably use that technique with my particular, you know, client that I'm working with to make sure that they could process that experience so that it doesn't create an emotional trigger anymore. And to really look at it not as what did you do wrong, but what can we do better, or what can you do better tomorrow coming into it? Because, you know, Ernie Els is talented enough that he can go out and fire at 65 and potentially be right back in it. So I think that's really cool about what we're seeing a lot of these players do is that they have the skill set to be resilient and to bounce back from an upset like that. But you don't want to let it linger into the next day because we don't want to have that filed in our memory bank as being a louder memory so that it's really impeding someone's performance. We want to be able to process it, consolidate it, and let it go on its merry way so that we have some room for some better experiences to kind of add to our confidence resume, if you will.
Right. Again, well said. Alison, I want to continue with you for a second because just as you were talking, another sort of thought on this same topic kind of popped in my head, and I want to get it out before it gets lost. Otherwise, I'll forget all altogether. But, when a player experiences something like this, obviously their nerves are going to be affected as well. Who do you think has a greater chance of success? A younger player who's maybe got a little stronger nerves, or maybe a more seasoned or older player whose nerves aren't quite as steady as it once were? Who do you think has a better likelihood of accomplishing what you just talked about?
That is a really great question. It's like
that's why I had to get it
or
out.
An orange.
That's why I had to get it out. It was too good of a question to pass. But you understand what I'm saying.
Yep.
Obviously it depends on the individual. It depends on the experience. But there are some advantages, and nerves are going to come into play in a situation like this. So give us an idea of how that would play out.
So I would say that if defaulting to this answer, I would have to say the junior. And the reason why is because there's less of a history that's filed in their memory of past failures. So you've got someone who's in their 60s, and they've got a whole list of successes and failures that they can choose to highlight. Well, you've got an 8-year-old who maybe has started golf and who hasn't played for decades and decades. Plus, I think a child's mind certainly works differently than an adult's mind, where they may not be able to retain as much of the emotional piece, as much as the forethought of how is this going to impact my future. I mean, we know that as far as looking at brain development, the prefrontal cortex isn't fully finished developing until 21 or 22 years of age, and that's where judgment, assessment, and thought in the future really comes into play. So you've got someone who doesn't have a fully developed brain yet. Well, they go through this incident of having a large number, it'll be like, all right, going on to the next tournament. Not going to really retain with them as much.
Right.
So I would have to default to the junior. I think they would be a little bit more resilient just based on not quite as much experience and not quite as much a history of failure to be able to reference versus a veteran.
Yeah, and Clint, I think you would agree with that as well. I mean, we're both.
I must be a cripple. I mean, I don't agree with it at all. Because I'm going to stand here. I got to defend the 60-year-olds. Okay? No, I'm beyond, and I know now. I feel really good because my brain hadn't fully matured at 21 years old. So all those bad decisions I made was because my brain hadn't fully matured yet. Okay, but from a player standpoint, at my age, I'm not quite 60 yet, but as an older player, and if you've played tournament golf, you've made eagles and you've made quadruples.
Right.
You're going to just go on and play the next hole. So experience, I think, plays a huge role here. Also, desire. What is my desires of what Ernie Els was trying to do?
Right.
It's obviously an embarrassment to him.
Sure.
But, as far as him having a bounce back here, I think Ernie Els got enough experience along with us other old guys that we're going to manage that better than maybe an inexperienced player would. So Alison's got a great point. I think from a brain establishment and how you're doing it, the memory banks, and, I'm going to forget it. I don't have a lot of negative experiences. I'm going to just go to the next hole. I think that at some point, that also plays into the more seasoned and senior player too.
Right.
I think that the middle ground here, that 30 to 40-year-old, may have a harder time bouncing back from it than what a junior would, and also a senior. I think the junior and senior approach to that would be very similar. One being going with Alison's point that, hey, we don't have that experience, we don't have it filed away as negative. But as I grow and I play enough competitive golf and have my ups and downs, I should learn how, as a senior player, to adapt and to move beyond that particular moment. And you see it like today. Ricky Fowler makes double bogey on the first hole because he's pressing, trying to do something out of the box. So yeah, I get her point, and I don't disagree with it. But I think there also is that at that some point in your playing career, you breach back into that junior attitudes. Okay, well, I made a 9. I played in a tournament wasn't too long ago, first Pro-Am that we played in up here. First hole, I made a 9. Honest to God. Yeah. Well, I shoot 9 over. I'm that 9 was the only over par. It was so. But you just keep playing, and you learn from it. Here I am up there, different level, not trying to hit it in the water to the left and hit it out of bounds twice to the right. I should have just went ahead and hit it in the water. Yeah. But the point is long-winded. Is that I think that there is a correlation between the junior player that Alison says, and I agree with. I was joking, I disagree with her. But I think that it's a point that we reach that we're almost like that kid playing again.
Right.
That we learn how to manage it, maybe a little differently, but we do learn how to manage it and go on and try to do the best we can on the next one.
Yeah, I agree, and I think both answers. There's really no right or wrong answer. I think Alison, your point is very valid as well as Clint's. Obviously, it depends on the individual players. Everybody is different. Some people can, rally much quicker and come back from, a situation like Ernie Els did.
Right.
But I see that both points are very valid. And it just makes for, it's kind of some interesting thoughts, if you will, on how Ernie's going to deal with this tomorrow. Is he going to draw from that memory bank of previous tournaments and say, okay, this is, it's an embarrassment, as you pointed out, Clint, but I know that, as Alison said, I can come back and shoot a 65 tomorrow and be right back in the tournament again. So,
without a doubt.
Right. So there's lots of flexibility there as well. All right, let's talk about the Augusta's greens. This is something that has been talked about for years, about being very quick and fast. Alison, I'm going to let you start off again. Just in your opinion, is there a technique for playing Augusta-type greens?
Practice on concrete, probably. I would imagine. I would say that, if you know the type of field you're going to be playing on, you know the type of circumstances that you're going to be faced, then you can create like or similar conditions to sort of prep for that. So for individuals that are prepping for the Masters and they know the greens are going to be hard, you'd probably want to put on some surfaces that didn't have any grass to sort of get the feel of how shocking this might be. Putting on smooth concrete into a hole and kind of getting a feel for what the conditions are going to be like to prep you not only mentally but emotionally for the shock of what you're going to experience when you get to that purity of playing surface. And so technique-wise, I think there's definitely some modifications that can be made in the technique in regards to taking a little bit of mass off the putter head as it's swinging through so you don't have as much force driving into the golf ball. Very very simply, a lot of players may line up the golf ball just slightly outside of center or near the toe of the putter, depending on the type of equipment that they're using, to take a little bit of mass off of that to get the ball just, started. But for the players that I coach now, if we're aware of the type of conditions that they're going to be in, then we prep for that. And whether that's putting on concrete, whether that's, modifying the technique a little bit, we want to create similar conditions to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Clint, I know that you work a lot with the short game and particularly putting in that. What's your thoughts on Augusta's greens? Obviously, these guys are going to face a lot of challenges.
Sure. If you watch the event today, if you go back and see the highlights, some of these guys hit the ball all over the lot today. The wind was blowing, it was sailing. See, I'm going to back it up. I know that there's very little chance that I can mimic the conditions that are going to show up at Augusta through the weekend. It's just a unique place.
Right.
But I do know that, and not to be funny, that the way you beat the greens at Augusta is to stay below the hole.
Yeah.
Okay, particularly in the greens that they miss in regulation. If you watch it today, Jordan Speaks, I bet he didn't hit 9 greens in regulation today, shot 66.
Wow.
He may have hit 10 or 11, maybe, okay, at best. But he didn't give anything back. He didn't make a bogey today. Well, if you watch the round, when he had putts, who had pitching the ball up, he pitched the ball into the best place to putt from. So I'm going to back the theory up. One is that I'm going to do what Alison said. I'm going to try to find the best conditions I can that will mimic the putting. But I want to mimic the conditions that my third shot's going to be coming in there when I'm trying to save par.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my chances for birdie. The par fives are all accessible. You know, I'm going to get my chances. But I want to be able to pitch the ball when I miss the greens. I want to be able to control the pitch the best I can to get the ball into the best place to putt from. That's where I'm going to focus. A lot of my preparation in my scoring game is not necessarily just going to be in putting. It's going to be more in pitching, because the greens are perfect. I mean, these guys, if they get the easy putt, they're going to make it, because the greens are perfect. They're rolling at great speed, you know. So their pitching quality and their success in pitching the ball when they miss the green is going to be a key factor. And I will bet you, if you charted it, the winner of this golf tournament on Sunday is going to be the person that pitched the ball when they missed the green, pitched the ball more often below the hole than above it. Now that's a bold prediction, but that's what it'll be.
I'm gonna jot that down right now, Clint.
And nobody's going to chart it because nobody else cares but me, you know. But that, if you watched it today. And I watch it in great interest because I teach a lot of that, how to score. So I'm watching it in great interest to be able to point out things. And it's all about pitching the ball where you can putt the easiest from. That's Jordan Spieth's, you know, that's what he's always done.
Yeah, and that – sorry, go ahead.
No, the point being, like at the U.S. Open, you know, that's a couple of times he missed a green in bad spots. He wasn't trying to pitch it close. He pitched it where the putt was easy. You know, 10-footer, he makes them all. Because if you watch where he's pitching the ball to, he's pitching the ball into a relatively easy putt to make. He's not making those real big swingers for par. He's making straight putts for par.
Yeah, he's giving himself the best chance.
Without a doubt.
You know, right, and you're right. You know, if you're not going to hit the green, then you want to make sure that your recovery shot is going to put you in a place that's going to give you the best opportunity to make those putts. And you're right. If you're all over, if you're all over the place, I agree with that. But you know, at the same time too, I think that there are situations, as Alison suggested, you know, where you can mimic I mean, you're not going to get exact conditions, but certainly you know you can, whether it be putting on concrete or something else. To sort of mimic the speed and get an idea of what it's like to putt on a slick surface like that. All right, let's take this in a little bit different direction. Coming into Augusta, and Alison, I'm going to start with you. Should a player go for it right from the get-go, or should they maybe play it a little more conservative, play it safe starting the tournament? So those players that went out today, would it be smart for them to kind of go for it and be a little more aggressive, or should they be somewhat conservative? And that doesn't mean that don't go for it when the opportunity presents itself, but not be too aggressive right from the start.
I think it really depends on how the player is feeling that particular day. I mean, if you've got someone who wakes up and they're just really striking the ball and everything's going well, you want to go with that flow and just go with whatever groove that they're in. If you've got a player that's maybe a little bit more managing themselves and maybe they're not hitting the ball as purely as they'd want, they might sort of go into a different contingency plan and play a little bit smarter to kind of manage it. So I do think there is some scoring strategies that take place this week, but ultimately, I mean, if you play around and you're too conservative and you're only a couple of under, and then you've got a player who is a little bit more bolder and they got to 6 or 7 under, you don't want to be kicking yourself walking off the golf course saying, I left a piece of myself out there. So I think that the individual needs to make that determination shot by shot, how they want to approach it. Do they need to be aggressive on this, or is that something they need to be a bit more conservative on? And I think that's where a good caddy relationship comes into play. is if you've got a great relationship with your caddy, you can have some dialogue about what's the best strategy shot per shot. I think it's a little bit tough to make a general umbrella statement to say, okay, we're going to play aggressive today or we're going to play conservative today, because you never know what's going to happen in a particular round. And to stay in the process and really to work it shot by shot, I think you can make some better decisions that way.
Right. Yeah, and that's so true. Clint, what about your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously you've got, you talk about Ricky Fowler kind of stepping on it there the first few holes, and it kind of backfired a little bit on him.
Well, he actually stepped on the first hole. He made double on the first hole and then birdied the next two. He got it out of the fairway on the first hole in the trees and just overplayed the shot and hit a tree, bounced around a little bit. But I think, Alison, she's correct. I mean, she made a point earlier in the show about how you'd get ready to prepare to play, and part of that was a plan, kind of a scoring plan. These guys are so good. They know what holes on any golf course suits their bread and butter shot. They know which holes they got good chances on, which holes they may not. And I think most of them are going to come in and say, hey, look, it's like Nicklaus. I saw the thing with Nicklaus in '86. He said, well, 66 to tie, 65 to win. So how do I go out there and shoot 65?
Yeah.
These guys, how am I going to shoot 10 under for 4 days? What holes give me the best chance of making birdies? What holes do I need to just make par and go on? Okay, and they understand that. They know what fits their game. Their caddies know what fits their game. I think she made a very valid point about the caddy. The caddy keeps the player on plan. The caddy, a good one, keeps his player on a level emotional keel. Yeah, we just made 4 birdies in a row, but this next hole doesn't suit our swing much. So let's settle down here, keep ourselves under control, make a good swing, move on to the next hole.
Right.
That high and low, the caddy keeps them in there. But I think the way these guys will approach it is where you put the hammer down a day or get there. It's a 72-hole tournament. They count the first hole just like they count the 72nd hole. Okay, they're going to come in with a plan on how they're going to try to play that golf course for the week. Very similar to a NASCAR driver figured out how they're going to drive this track, but the conditions change. So they got their base plan. But at some point, that base plan may change.
Right.
And again, I agree with Alison. That's that caddy-player relationship. Is when do you let your guy go, and when do you kind of say, okay, let's stay on plan here. And it's a cool. I think it's a very exciting thing to see that makeup of caddy and player, and how well they work together, and how that caddy manages his player.
Yeah, and that's a great point as well. When you look at some of the really top players, Freddie Couples and of course Jack, but Phil Mickelson, have all had really, really good caddies. And certainly there are plenty of other caddies out there that are fantastic.
Certainly.
Those sort of stick in mind as some of the better ones. And if you look at how they played in difficult situations, their caddies certainly did play a big role. There were often times, when a caddy, even Steve Williams, when he was caddying Tiger, obviously Steve had a very aggressive type personality, but there were times when he knew that Tiger, needed to ratchet it back a little bit on certain holes. Which brings me to another question. Nicklaus was always, would always talk about how sometimes a course or maybe a particular hole, and you kind of alluded to this, Clint, maybe doesn't suit their eye or their swing. What do you do in a situation like that, Clint, and Alison? I'll let you answer as well.
Well, if it doesn't suit your eye, I think you have to figure out how you're going to play the hole in a way that you can, par is still a good score. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't care where you're playing, par is a good score. So if I've got a hole that, maybe got my number, I'm maybe a little bit emotionally distraught with this hole, that historical thing, I just made double here last week or whatever, I'm going to try to figure out, in my opinion, the way we talk to people, is I'm going to play that hole with my favorite clubs. The average player out there is, if this hole doesn't suit my eye hitting the driver, what's my favorite wood to hit? What can I move this thing down the fairway with? My favorite club to hit. I want some confidence going here. I don't want to play a club that I've got, that may not suit this hole. I want to have the best thing in my hand to play a hole that doesn't suit my eye. And then I'm going to play my next favorite club in range. If I'm in range, I'm going to take the club I need to hit to get there. But if I'm not in range, I'm going to take my favorite club and move it up the fairway again.
Right.
To get into that third shot, that scoring range, to give myself a best chance of doing what I can do on this hole that doesn't suit my game. But I see it all the time. We take players out on the course, and and I ask them, what hole don't you like? Well, I take them to that hole because they can. Well, they do. See, they can play.
Right.
They can play their favorite holes really good. I don't need to help them there.
Right.
I need to help them on the holes that they don't like, and try to help them analyze, how am I going to get around my home course hole that I hate? I hate this hole. Well, what's your favorite club? I want you to hit that. What's your next favorite club? I want you to hit that. And then all of a sudden, they've made a par, maybe a bogey, where they've been making double and triples.
Right, exactly.
So that's the way we try to manage it, survive the hole, survive it. Now, the tour players and the top echelon players are going to take a different approach. But the average player out there should take their favorite club and survive the hole and go on to their best hole. Move on, and I think the best players in the world do that too. That's why they hit 3-wood off the tee instead of driver sometimes. Hey, I just need to get it in the fairway and play on. Get it in the middle of the green, 2-putt, and go on.
Yeah,
because
true.
Both of y'all understand, and most of them do, is that it's not really about how many birdies they make. It's how many they don't give back. They're going to make their share of birdies, 3, 4, 5 around. But the winner is the guy that doesn't give them back. And that's those holes that don't fit their eye, that they just don't want to give the birdie back on that hole. It's not their best opportunity to make birdie, so just don't give one back.
Right. And that Alison, of course, comes into strategy and preparation. As Clint's talking about, if you're playing a hole that doesn't really particularly suit your eye, rather than trying to go at it as you normally would, you have to think with a little bit of strategy. So working with your students, Alison, if they come up against a particular scenario that they're not comfortable with, how do you help alleviate? What are some things that you do with your students to help alleviate some of that discomfort?
I want to find out what makes them uncomfortable in the first place. Because I think even when we start using the script and the belief this hole doesn't suit my eye, you're already creating a belief about that hole that may not be accurate.
Right.
I can understand if you're a fader at the golf ball and you step up to a dog leg right to left. Okay, fair enough. But if you break down the script of this hole doesn't suit my eye, and then you really get down to the nuts and bolts of what's required of me to play this hole. Take away these statements and these beliefs about, the shot doesn't fit my eye or the hole doesn't fit my eye, and just take a look at it as where's the best place for me to position the golf ball right now. I need to position it here. Well, what's the best club that's going to get me to that position? Well, it might be different than a driver. So I want to start with a student and really kind of explore with them, and this is more of the therapist kind of coming out from me, is, well, what makes you uncomfortable about this hole? Let's examine that. Because if I can reinforce that they've got the skill set to face any obstacle that comes their way, and most of the obstacles that are going to be the most challenging is what comes up in their mind and what comes up in their heart, we can deal with that. And for them to identify, okay, well, maybe it's the bunker here that's most uncomfortable because I see that in my vision when I look at the hole. All right, well, we can work with some visualization tools there to redirect our attention to what's a better focal point. Or maybe they're uncomfortable with hitting a long iron into a green. All right, so why don't we take a look at what's most uncomfortable about hitting a long iron? Do you have a past history of having a low success rate with it? Is there something that you can position yourself better so that you have a little bit more flat footing, if you will, for that particular shot? So I would take a step back and ask them, let's look at what's making you uncomfortable, and let's break down those scripts. Let's break down the narrative of what you're creating here, because really it's just a golf hole. It's grass, and you're hitting the ball on some grass, and let's take all the other stuff that we tend to build up, and let's keep it really simple.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that approach. Certainly, both of them are great approaches. But I like that particularly, Alison, because I think a lot of times, especially the high handicap golfers out there, they see a scenario that maybe they're not comfortable with, and all of a sudden the fear and the doubts sort of creep into their mind, and they've already lost half the battle before they've even stepped up to the tee box. And I like some, Clint, what you talked about as well. I think that, rather than hitting my driver that's going to go, 250 yards and 40 yards to the right, maybe I can hit a hybrid off the tee that's going to go maybe 200 yards pretty straight down the fairway. So to me, it makes more sense to ratchet back a little bit and select a club that's I know I can hit comfortably, relatively straight, than trying to, get out there on a hole that I'm not comfortable with to begin with, and playing a club that I know is not going to yield the results I need. And, so great answers by both. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that the favorite club idea is exactly what I was talking about. It's a matter of taking what bothers them about the hole, and backing the fear out. If I'm standing up there on my favorite wood, I'm really not fearful of that. Mm-hmm. I'm fully confident, and I got good positive thinkings about that, and so I go ahead, I'll make a better golf swing, and then move on to the next one. It's all about giving the person the tools and the opportunity to eliminate the fear of that hole that they're playing, without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, and Alison, you raise a very valid point as well. Because you've played competitively as well as teach, and the difference really between the professionals and the amateurs is when a professional steps up to a hole, he or she sees the position that they want to place the ball in, where the amateur looks at the bunkers over here and the water out in the front and so on and so forth. They're looking at all the trouble. And it's not that the professionals don't realize or acknowledge that it's there, but they're not focusing on the trouble. They're focusing on where they want to position that ball to set things up for their approach or what have you. And that's pretty much what you're saying, correct, Alison?
Absolutely. If you're more skilled at being able to redirect your attention and focusing on where you want the golf ball to go, which is a skill to be able to be built, everyone is capable of doing that, then you have a higher chance of hitting that target. And I think the pros are more finely skilled at it, at their level. I think that's integral to them being successful. And I think many amateurs would rather go spend $400 on a driver that they think might have them hit that target versus actually taking a lesson or improving their mental game. A couple of sessions is working on their mental game, and they can save that $400 on the driver and actually have some more lifelong skills for some happiness. So absolutely, I agree with you.
Yeah. It reminds me, and Clint, my memory's a little foggy. You might remember the gentleman, but years ago on the Golf Channel, there was a gentleman, and all I can remember is his first name was Wally. And they shot a video where he went around with a 7-iron, a pitching wedge, and a putter.
Yeah.
Played a par 5. You know who I'm talking about? I can't think of his name offhand, but he was. But anyways, he played a par 5, par 4, par 3, and ended up 1 under par. And the longest club he had in his bag was a 7-iron.
Well,
and it just really goes to what Alison just pointed out. I mean, you don't have to have this great, $400 driver. If you're not going to be able to position it very well anyway. So, right?
I just got done writing a piece that we use in some of our clinics. Why isn't your handicap coming down? We got better equipment. We got better golf courses. The golf ball goes further. Why is your handicap not coming down? I mean, you need to answer that question for yourself. Is if you got all this $400 driver and fancy golf balls and the golf courses are great and your score ain't getting any better, you need to rethink what you're doing. But, I've been around long enough to remember when we played with wooden golf clubs, right?
Right.
And,
me too.
Okay. And we would, in the winter when we were up in Wisconsin, we obviously do a lot of club repair work. People bring in their clubs. It would be a driver, 2 wood, 3 wood, and a 4 wood. That's all they had. And the driver was brand new. And the 2 wood looked like they had been to battle with it because they found that they could hit the 2 wood better.
Right.
It went straighter. It went further. They were smart. They didn't buy into the advertisements they see every day thinking you needed a $400 driver to hit it further. They already had one. It was called a 2 wood.
Yeah.
You know, and so they figured out that was the best club for them to hit in order to move the ball down the fairway where they may wanted it to go. You know, I had for years people going, well, I want you to teach me to hit my driver. I said, my first question to them was, well, how you hit your 3-wood? Oh, I hit my 3-wood fine. I said, okay, there you go. That'll be $50. Just keep hitting your 3-wood. Why
right.
not?
You know, and that's the thing, and I think this is really added to, and again, it's not about bashing the equipment manufacturers or things like that.
Play the clubs you can play the best with. Right.
And and that doesn't mean you don't work on, when you're with your professional on some of the clubs that you're not, that's where you need to really focus on. But I agree, and listen, even the pros. I mean, I can remember there's been, rounds of golf. I mean, Tiger. I'm trying to think of the tournament he was playing in a number of years back, and he barely pulled his driver out. He was hitting 2 irons, and he was hitting his 3-wood a lot. Freddie Couple used to do that as well. Freddie Couple used to play his 3-wood on a lot of holes. I mean, he could hit it just about as far as his driver anyways.
Tiger Woods won the British Open one year. I can't remember where the course was. He hit 2 iron off tee all day.
Right, exactly. And that just furthers the point as well. All right, Alison. We got to move on here. Let me ask you this. Being that we've got 3 more days of the first major of the year for the men, anyways. What can your students and also the listeners tuning in tonight? What can they take away? Or what would you like them to take away from watching the Masters this weekend?
I love that question because I've already been asking some students to watch, and in fact, the women's first major was last week, the ANA Inspiration. So I was kind of already setting the stage for this back-to-back week of majors, if you will. And I said, here's some things that you and I are working on in your individual swing. Now, when you're watching these upcoming 2 events, see if you see them in other players. Look out for them. Get more keen with your eye to see what some of the best players in the world are doing. And this is the exact thing that you're working on. Because I really want them to activate those mirror neurons, if you will. The mirror neurons in the brain that when you're looking at the same activity, it's almost as if your body is doing it. And so let's say I have a student that's working on hip turn and getting a little bit deeper hip turn. If they're able to identify it when they watch Jordan Spieth, or they're able to identify it when they watch Lydia Ko, they're actually kind of integrating a little bit about how they can make that better into their own personal golf swing.
Right.
So I like them to look at some of the techniques of the players, not that we are necessarily copying their style, but for them to have a better understanding of what they're going to do in their individual swing by looking at how the best players in the world do that particular motion. I think, too, managing their game. So as they watch some of these players hit some shots that don't hit the green, how do they recover? If they hit some shots that go into the trees, how do they recover? Because I think there is sometimes a limited memory on only the great shots that tour players hit. Well, those are just the ones that they put on TV. And sometimes we don't get a chance to see some of the bad ones. And so how are these players recovering from adversity? And that way they can see how they might be able to integrate some of those pieces into their own game when they face adversity.
Excellent comment, Alison. Thank you for that. One of the things I remember, and you're right in your point that you don't get to see everything on TV, of course, with editing and so forth. You certainly do see some, bad shots here and there, but for the most part, you see everything sort of running smoothly. But when I used to walk around years ago at the Canadian Open and watch a lot of the players, one of the things that I used to really watch was how they handled themselves in adversity. And by that I mean when they did hit a not so perfect shot, how did they handle themselves? And it was interesting because compared to amateurs, if you look at most amateurs when they hit a bad shot, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of angst and so forth. And the professionals sort of just plod along, and I'm sure inside there's probably as Ernie and maybe some of the others today that didn't do well on a couple of holes, there's certainly some emotion in there, but they seem to be able to put it in check. And that's something that I really want, any of my students that might be watching this weekend, is to look at the emotion when they're given that chance to be able to see that. And Alison, as you said, that they edited out a lot of stuff, but that's what I want them to take away as well. As I want them to be able to see how the player handles themselves, both physically how they recover, but also emotionally how they handle themselves, because that can, I think, add quite a bit of knowledge as well. And Clint, what about you? What about your students that might be watching?
Well, I think Alison's absolutely correct. What the coverage of a lot of golf tournaments really doesn't do the average player any justice.
No.
They only show the 20-foot going in, or they show the terrible shot, but they never show them how they get around it. How do they get, like I think Jordan Speaks has been hitting like 60% of the greens in regulation, and he's still shooting par or better. Well, obviously he's hitting, 10 greens around. He's getting the ball up and in 8 times, and I'll bet you they ain't showed it up and in once. What's he doing when he misses a green? The average guy out there is hitting maybe 3 or 4 greens around. They need to be focused on what they're going to do when they don't hit the green. But I think that if you look at it, what I ask my players to do, and some you can get them to do it, but I encourage them to go. We're lucky here; we've got several tour stops that they can go to, and simply watch the way they play.
Yeah.
What's their tactics when they don't hit the ball on the green? Watch how they play the game. They all hit it good, and that's my great point. Watch how they do their technique in their full swings. Cyber vision years ago, and even today, is a great thing to mimic and to see what another player is doing. It's very helpful, I agree. But most importantly, too, is to watch how they use what they have.
Yeah.
Watch how they get themselves around the golf course. The average person, the reason that the handicaps are not coming down is that you can't hit it good enough to make up for poor scoring. We know that. At some point, the average guy's got to, and I think the tour players do this, they accept the fact that they're hitting the ball okay, and then they go about refining their skills of playing.
Yeah.
How are they going to use their skills? The average player out there never accepts the fact that their skill's good enough. But once they accept that it's good enough right now that they can go out and try to use what they have and to do the best they can, then they can begin to focus on learning how to play. And that's what both the women on the LPGA Tour and the men on the PGA Tour, they are the best players. Because we've all seen great ball strikers that couldn't get it in the hole. These are the best players in the world, and that's what they call them, the best players in the world. Not the best hitters in the world.
Right.
Not the best putters in the world. They're the best players in the world. And that's what I try to get my students to pay attention to, is how they play, how they manage their way around the course.
Well said, both of you. The other thing, too, that I think a lot of people sort of miss the boat on is, that point that you just said is they don't look at, they don't focus on how they should play. And I'll give you an example. A lot of players will, and I'm talking to amateurs now, will go out and they'll start tinkering around with their swing in the middle of a round. You never see a professional do that. I mean, if there's a slip up with the grip or something like that, a professional might tweak, very minor, but they're not going to do a major overhaul. And a lot of times, and Alison, I'm sure you can attest this, you've seen players do that that you're working with, that'll go out there and they'll hit a few bad shots, and right away they're trying to analyze everything and figure out and try to make changes midstream in a round, and that's just not going to fly. It's not going to help, and it's just going to make matters worse. What do we do in a situation like that? How do we stop them in their tracks, work with what, as Clint said, work with what they've got that day, and then, do the fixes afterwards when they're back working with you? Alison?
They have to be able to identify how to stop that line of thinking. I think some people end up getting 4 or 5 holes deep, and then they're like, oh, maybe I should try something different. Or, maybe I've been trying to overanalyze too much. Having a technique that sort of snaps them back into place. I always tell my players, if you hit more than 2 bad shots in a row, it's time to take a step back and figure out what's going on. And not necessarily in the technical aspect, but figure out what's going on as far as your focus, your emotional levels, where is your attention being directed. And so for a lot of my junior players, I'll have them, simply wear like a rubber band or something on their wrist. And if they find that they hit those 2 shots in a row, that they aren't particularly fond of, they can sort of snap that rubber band, and it's a reminder for them to cue into the skills that they know how to use. Okay, let's do our pre-shot routine. Let's take some deep breaths. What emotions am I experiencing right now, and how can I expel them from my body? Do I need to come up with a plan B for how I'm approaching this particular shot or this particular hole, instead of trying to just continue to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result? I think we all know what that is at some level. And so, I think there needs to be that level of awareness. How many shots is it going to take for you to do something different? And what is your personal quota? For me, it's one. I hit one shot that I'm not particularly fond of, and I already know I need to either, get my attention a little bit better. I need to do some deep breathing to take my system and get a bit more neutral or more stabilized. I need to double check my alignment, whatever it might be. But definitely not getting into the habit of, okay, let's fix this technique. Let's take a look at my grip. Let's go more inside out. I want to stay away from that and stay into some more mental approaches to work with versus trying something different on every single golf swing.
Yeah, excellently articulated as well, Alison. Thank you. And just one final thought, and we've got to wrap this up now. And I'm going to let the two of you continue on the evening and watch some of the highlights and just enjoy the rest of your evening. But one thing I want to add to what Alison was just saying, as I'm sure you both know from all of my posts and that, I also host the Women of Golf on Tuesday mornings with Cindy Miller. And we have the pleasure of interviewing a lot of the young ladies coming up on the Symetra Tour and some of the LPGA players as well. And exactly what you just said, Alison, every one of them talks about the same thing. When they're on the practice tee, they work on, this is what I'm working on, that's what I'm working on. But when they're out there, they're playing. They're not focusing on what they need to fix. They're not, if they make a bad shot, they don't sit there and analyze it for the next hour or so. They move on. They continue to play the game that they're currently in, and they'll deal with whatever demons may have been picked up along the round after the round. And it's just interesting and just how focused the mindset of some of these young ladies coming up in professional golf. And we certainly, Cindy and I, have a lot of pleasure interviewing these ladies. There's going to be some great champions coming up in women's golf here in the future.
Ted, to add on top of that, is it how many times have you been out to the club, you watch a group play, they get done, they go to the bar, have a beer, and have a sandwich. The tour player goes to the practice range. Right. How many tour players practice after they've played? Because their mindset is they're playing. When they get done, they'll go fix what they didn't like.
Right, exactly. And that goes to exactly what Alison was talking about as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just a characteristic.
Yeah, and this also goes to further answer the question that you brought out earlier, is why handicaps are not going down for a lot of these amateur golfers out there, and that's because they're going to hole 19, which there's nothing wrong with that.
It's okay.
But
it's okay.
If you truly want to get better, you've got to do what the pros are doing, not necessarily copying their swing, but their patterns. There's a time to play, and then there's a time to work on what needs to be worked on. And guys, I want to thank both of you, Alison and Clint. It's been fun. It's been interesting getting your perspectives, and as we move into the weekend to watch some of the Masters golf and that, and it's going to be exciting to see what some of the play has. Very quickly, Alison, I'm going to let you go first, ladies first. Let the folks know how they can reach out to you if they're interested in knowing a little bit more about you, websites and that sort of thing.
You bet. They can head to my website, AlisonCurtGolf.com. It has links to all of my social media as well as email. I teach at Wood Ranch Golf Club. I'm the Director of Instruction at Simi Valley. And there's also some information on how to set up some sessions if you want to work on your mental game. And then I would say stay tuned for May 19th, as I'll be on the Golf Channel. I've aired a couple of tips for some segments I will air between Michael Breed's show and Martin Hall's show. So feel free to pick up a free tip May 19th for that on the Golf Channel.
Perfect. And Clint?
Same old stuff, man. We're at the TGM Golf, the R3 Approach Facebook. They can get us there. They can get me at my email, which is clintgolf001@yahoo.com. It'd be more than happy to work with any of them, but just what we want to tell people is watch a little golf, but play a lot.
Yeah,
got to get out and play it. Stop watching it and get out and play.
Well said. Again, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys giving of your time. And Alison, while I was listening to Clint, not that I wasn't deep in thought and paying attention, but I saw your email that you.
I hope so.
Yeah, I saw the email that you sent me about a potential interview, and yes, I would love to. So send me whatever information, and I'll be more than happy to reach out and have her on as a guest.
Fantastic. Sounds good.
Yeah. Alison, good luck to you. Great. Have a good
thank
weekend.
you guys. I look forward to you coming back on the Coach's Corner panel on Golf Talk Live, and thanks very much, as always, for giving of your time. And have a great weekend. Enjoy the tournament.
Thanks, guys.
You as well. Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, that was my very special Coach's Corner panel for the Masters edition of Golf Talk Live, and I'm just waiting very patiently for my good friend, Mr. Byron Casper, son of legendary Billy Casper. He's going to be joining me as well here very shortly, and I think actually he may already be here right now. So let me just do a quick introduction here, and we'll begin the second half of Golf Talk Live. My good friend, Mr. Byron Casper, is joining me here tonight. He is the director of golf at the Casper Golf Academy. And as I mentioned, he is the son of legendary Billy Casper, who I had the honor and pleasure of interviewing a couple of years ago here when I was first starting out the program at Golf Talk Live. His father, unfortunately, is no longer with us. Passed away, I believe, the year before last. But he was a great gentleman, a great ambassador of the game, and just a joy and pleasure to have on the program, as is Byron, and that's why I enjoy having him on as well. He's going to be joining me here, not just tonight, but he's going to be joining me on the Thursday eve of every major for 2016, and we are going to tell you a little bit of the reason why he's going to be doing that here in just a moment or two. But let me just tell you a little bit about Byron and his background, just for those of you that maybe aren't that familiar with him. Byron Casper, as I said, has been around golf all his life, and certainly recognizes his love of the game started early with going to his father's golf camps in the summer and traveling to different events to watch his famous father, Billy Casper, compete. He began his own career in golf world as a teenager and was a caddy at the SPGA, which is now the Champions Tour, and PGA Tours, and worked with for both his father and other tour professionals during the time. He attended the Golf Academy of America in San Diego and Southwestern College, and then went to work for Carbide Golf as the senior PGA Tour representative for about a year. And then he moved on to a position as player liaison for the International Golf Tour and the International PGA. He then later moved to Scotland in the 90s and was the head club fitter and teaching professional for Heritage Golf of St. Andrews, and then the St. Andrews Golf Company, both manufacturers of golf equipment. Back in 2007, he moved back to the U.S. and was the first golf professional with Golf Tech in Utah. And during this time, he became a certified golf coach and master club fitter for all major golf brands. So without further hesitation, let me bring on my good friend, Mr. Byron Casper. Good evening.
After that introduction, what can I say?
Yeah, we're going to have to make the second half of the show a little quick because I think I spent oops, I think I just cut you off here.
Well, I think I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there we are. Sorry, I was doing something here and I hit the wrong button, but sorry about that.
No, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you. And as I sort of leaked out a little bit earlier, but we're going to do the official unveiling, if you will, here in just a moment. We're going to continue on. Of course, this is Masters Week, and this is a special edition of Golf Talk Live. This is a Masters edition, and you and I are going to talk a little bit about the Masters and just not only from the current player's perspective, but also a little bit from your father's perspective. Of course, he was a Masters champion in his days, and but we're going to talk about a special contest that you and I have sort of put together here, and you very generously have helped me quite a bit. It's the Golf Talk Live Major Champion Couples Contest, and And I'm going to tell them very quickly what that is, and we're unrolling that officially tonight. And let me tell you first off what's involved, what you have a chance to win if you're the lucky recipient, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the rules. First off, it's going to be a weekend retreat, if you will, in San Diego in Southern California. And as I mentioned, Byron has very graciously helped me put some of this together. You're going to get 2 nights, one night at bed and breakfast at the Hacienda Hotel in Old Town San Diego, and that's also going to include for 2 at Salt Creek Golf Club, a round of golf. And then the second night is also at a bed and breakfast at the Palm Mountain Hotel and Spa, and that also is going to include a golf for 2 at the Encina Golf Club. And then during that stay, you're also going to have an opportunity to meet with Byron Casper himself for some lunch at the Old Town Tequila Factory, which is hosted, as I said, by Byron. And just to remind you that Byron is an international PGA member and instructor and son, of course, of legendary professional golfer Billy Casper. And also included in that, which I had an opportunity to read, he's also going to include in that as one of the prizes is a copy of Billy Casper's last book, The Big Three and Me, and it's a great read, so you want to make sure that you sift through that. A lot of great information, a lot of great stories in there. And all put together, the value of the prize exceeds $1,000. So it's a great package and some great prize and some great sponsors, if you will, of this particular contest. So thank you to the Hacienda Hotel and the Salt Creek Golf Club, and as well as the Palm Mountain Spa. Thank you very much for very generously donating the prize, and whoever wins this is going to have a great time. Let me just also mention just some of the rules here. I've sort of jotted them down. I'm going to be officially posting everything, including the prize itself and just some of the contestant rules and that. But basically, you must be 21 or older to participate in the contest. And what we're going to ask of you to do is there are 4 majors, of course, beginning this weekend with the Masters. And I've set up a special email. It's golftalklivecontest@gmail.com. And what we're going to ask for you to do is to email who you think the winner for each of the events, for the Masters, the U.S. Open, the Open, or formerly known as the British Open, and the PGA Championship. Now, you don't have to do them all in one email. You can send an email this weekend, and then one for the U.S. and the Open, and, of course, the PGA, and who you think the winner is going to be. And the deadline, of course, is going to be to submit those emails is 12 midnight on Friday of each of the events. And the reason why we're doing that, obviously, you can't have the tournament go through, and you're going to know who the winner is at that point. So we want you to guess at this. I got to make it a little bit difficult. But you'll get 4 chances. You'll get a chance. Each person can only do 1 submission per tournament. So it's for a total of 4. So you have 4 chances. Now, you don't have to get all 4 of them correct. That's why we're letting you do it this way. You just have to get 1 correct. And when doing so, you're going to go into the hat, as you will. And then the week following, the Thursday following the PGA Championship, which will be the last major of 2016, Byron's going to come on, and we're going to announce the winner live on Golf Talk Live of this fabulous prize. So that's starting tonight. So you'll have until, as an example, you'll have until midnight tomorrow for your submissions, and they go to Golf Talk Live contest@gmail.com is where you send them to, and we need, of course, your full contact information, your full name, and so forth. And this is a prize contest for 2. So it's a couples contest. That's what we want. And you'll have, as I said, till midnight Friday this week, and then subsequently for the U.S. Open and PGA and the Open, the British Open as well. So you'll have 4 chances to do that. And as I said, we will throw them in the hat and select a winner the following Thursday, the PGA Championship. And this is going to be open to Canadian and U.S. residents only, obviously for proximity because it is taking place in Southern California. Airfare is not included, so that's part of the reason why we're limiting to that. But a great prize nonetheless.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I just want to point that out. The airfare is it, but anywhere from Canada and U.S. you can get to San Diego very easily at very limited expense. And as I said, you're getting a great package here in this contest. So I will keep letting everybody know, Byron, throughout. I'll post it up in social media, and I know that you'll relay that information as well. And once the winner has been selected, we will provide in email how you go about claiming your prize. And that will, of course, be contacting Byron himself, his assistant, and they will give you all of the ins and outs. And you'll have actually, the other thing I want to quickly note before I forget is from the date that we draw the winner, which will be the Thursday following the PGA Championship, you will have 1 year to claim your prize. So you have plenty of time. You're not limited to taking it right away. You'll have a year to think about when you want to visit San Diego area, Southern California, and play some great golf. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But again, Byron, thank you very much for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live. And let's talk a little bit about the Masters. A couple points I want to very quickly make.
It's been an exciting first day already, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, we talked about that on the Coach's Corner panel the first hour. And the gang that was on with me, Alison Curdt, who's a master professional, she's out in California as well. And then Clint Wright, who's up in, I believe, North Carolina. He's been watching. In fact, he was watching a little bit while we were on the air, just sort of updating it. A couple of things I want to mention, Byron. First off, Jordan Spieth closes out with a 6 under his first round. Of course, he was last year's Masters champion. Good start to the day.
You know what? I think it was a great start to the day. I've heard rumors that because of the wind conditions out there and because of the possible conditions coming up for the weekend, that they haven't mowed the greens and the greens aren't rolling as fast as they were in the past. So maybe that has a little bit to do with some of the low rounds. But, I would have to say that regardless, it's a very difficult golf course. And anytime you can go out and shoot anything in the 60s at Augusta, it's a great round.
Oh, fantastic. Now, on the flip side of that, and we talked about that, I won't get into too much more about it because we covered it in the first hour, but Ernie Els, of course.
Oh, my gosh.
Seasoned veteran. Yeah, it ended up now. I heard on the radio when I was driving up here, I heard on the radio that they actually had him marked as a 10 on the first hole, but it's been adjusted now. Somebody counted incorrectly, and it was a 9. So I guess it's 1 stroke better, but 9 on hole number 1. And as I understand from the commentary, that he was set up for a par putt at just under 2 feet, and then sort of things fell apart from there. I'm sure you can attest to, and I'm sure your dad, if he was with us, could attest that Augusta greens are tough to handle.
They really are, and but it's also not just the greens that are tough to handle. It's everything that happens when you're at Augusta. Augusta has a natural way of bringing back memories, good and bad. And the greens weren't rolling terribly quick, but in saying that, his 9 really should have been no worse than a 7. And very probably a bogey. His last little one-handed shots out of frustration. We've all been there. We've all done that. Mm-hmm. But, I did cost him an extra 2 strokes, and he may not be too happy about that come Friday. So, I always am reminded of what Dad used to say, and that is, whether you know what you're preparing for or not, always be prepared. And that's one of those situations that I think being able to not be as frustrated as he was is something that he probably wishes he had back a little bit.
Yeah, and that brings me to really sort of the first question that I want to talk about tonight. What a player's mindset coming into Augusta is, and then I want you to sort of maybe take this from your father's perspective. What did Billy do when he was preparing for a major? What was sort of his mindset coming into it, and how did he prepare himself when he was playing the majors?
Well, the interesting thing is I think everybody has their own, their own little combination of things that work. For Dad, Dad was never a big range practicer. He wouldn't spend hours on the range practicing. Right. What he would do is he would go out and he'd hit 5-6 balls per hole, and really understand not just hitting good shots, but hitting shots where he wanted to hit them and kind of planning ahead. So, when you look at the majors, they do that to the extreme. You may have already mentioned this, but I'm sure about, I think it was Rory that decided to not play in the par 3 contests. And, on the surface of that, it seems a little bit, that's a little bit spoiled, et cetera, et cetera. But in reality, you have to understand that, my dad used to say that, this is their office. When you're a golf professional, that is your office. And whatever it takes for you to be top and performing in your office is what you should be doing. So for somebody like a dad, it was very much playing the course, understanding the conditions that were going to be happening that week, making sure that his ball striking was fine and that his short game was fine. But more important than even any of that was really understanding what the course conditions were going to be like.
Right. And I think, too, and in that particular generation, I think it was less about technique than it was about playing and handling the conditions that they were going to be faced with. I think in your dad's generation, with Nicklaus and Palmer and many other greats that play alongside your father, I think that's really was the focus. Nicklaus, you never heard him talk about the technique and, whether his arm was in the right place or not. It was about getting himself in the position to give himself the best opportunities throughout his rounds, and I think your father obviously was like that as well. Correct?
I think all of them, all of them were like that. In fact, it's interesting because when I think of my father or any of the others, Nicklaus, Palmer, Player, even good friends like Don January and Miller Barber, or Gene Littler or Gabe Brewer, I don't ever remember any of them questioning whether or not they could hit a golf ball.
Right.
Not once. I do remember them having bad rounds and dissecting what made that bad round and then fixing that particular problem. So I don't think they overthought it. I don't think that they were able to overthink it. I think that's one of the reasons they became such great players, because they weren't overthinking too much. They just were making sure that they had what it took in order to win that week. So again, for somebody like Jim Faree or Tom Kite, that's going to be standing on the driving range, getting your swing down and getting your target, mechanism in your brain working perfectly. For somebody like a dad, Billy Casper, that's going to be going out on the course and, again, hitting 4 or 5 shots, but from 4 different spots on the fairway, so that he understands exactly what and where that ball needs to go. So, again, it's just really preparing back then as opposed to now. Now they have swing coaches. They have nutritionalists. They have all of these people that are preparing their mind and their body. And so it really is up to them to prepare themselves for that particular course.
Right. What do you think, Byron, was your dad's strongest part of his game? I mean, as some of the players this week are dealing with some of the, as you said, that the greens aren't quite as fast, but traditionally Augusta's greens were quite fast, and as one of my earlier guests talked about, in preparation, practicing on putting on concrete would be about the closest thing. What was your dad's strongest part of his game, and what was maybe one of his weaker areas that you can recall?
Well, I'm going to start this. I'm going to go in reverse because I want to share with you a little story that I heard my dad say to one of his friends outside of his home in Utah years ago, and he threw a ball down and he putted it across the ice in the middle of winter and laughed and said, "The greens at Augusta are faster than this." and so that's a good example of how quick greens are. But I would say that the best part of his game, hands down, was his putting and then his chipping. He had the ability to, about 99% of the time, get up and down in 2. So much so that he never even considered it a real problem. If he was ever off the green, to a lot of people, that's going to be a struggle for a par or take a bogey. But Dad always had this amazing capacity to believe from the get-go that his worst number was going to be that par. And so, I would say, again, it was putting, it was short game. A good friend of mine, John Miller, Johnny Miller's son, so John Miller Jr. said to me the other day, he says, our dads are good to the level that, and both of us are professionals as well, but our fathers
Right.
are good to a level that is even hard for us to understand, because they had the ability to know within a yard where that ball was going to go. And that's just an amazing quality. So all of them are good ball strikers, and Dad was a good ball striker as well. He just was probably better than average when it comes to, in fact, he was definitely better than average when it comes to how good his short game was.
Yeah, and that brings up to another point too, Byron, that one of the other guests, Clint Wright, who's a professional out in North Carolina, talked about, and he said, pitching and chipping and that, but pitching particularly, this has helped as an example today with Jordan in his 600 round. He's not hitting. He might have hit 8 to 10 greens, but he was able to position his recovery, his pitch shot or chip, into the right spot on the green to be able to make those putts in order to either save par or get those birdies. And I think this is where a lot of amateurs miss the boat. So if you were going to, feel free to sort of recall any thoughts that your dad shared with you as well. If you were going to advise some of the amateurs today to really where they should be focusing their efforts, what would that be?
Well, that's a huge question. The truth of it is, it really depends on what sort of mental process you go through and which way you think. So if you're more of a feel player, you're going to think more feel and emotional, and if you're more of a statistic type player, mechanical, you're going to think that. We all know that there's plenty of cases where guys hit 15, 16 greens in a round and still end up shooting par or worse. And then you hear of situations, like today's a great example with Jordan and getting up and down so much, which really saved his bacon out there. And so it really is all components in your game coming together at the same time in order to win these championships. And so for your amateur golfer, I would say there are so many aspects of what is important and what isn't important. But for me, and Dad is the one that ingrained this in me, so this is directly from Billy Casper, it really starts with your hands, because your hands are the only contact that your body has with that golf ball.
Right.
The only contact. And so it starts with your hands. It works your way up from the feet, making a good grounded body position and being able to make a good upper body turn. And from there, it really is about being square at impact so that that ball is going where you're aimed. And really, that is what it comes down to. And so if you take a half swing, but you hit the ball 150 yards straight as an arrow, or you take a three-quarter swing because that's your control area, then those are what you should be working on. Because let's not forget that the game of golf is about scoring. It's not about how pretty you look dressed up in your good clothes. It's not about how pretty your golf swing is. It really isn't. You can have the prettiest swing in the world, and guess what? It's not going to win you tournaments. What's going to win you tournaments is understanding your own swing and how that works.
And you raise a great point, Byron, because I was sitting here thinking as you were talking that in today's golf there tends to be that sort of manufacturing a swing as opposed to tapping into someone's natural ability. And if you look at comparison to players in your dad's era and the players today, there's a big difference. I mean, most of the players that played along the time your dad and some of the other greats of golf had uniquely different looking swings. Today, many of the swings look very similar. In fact, some of them are identical.
Do.
And I just wonder sometimes if that's why you're not seeing, I mean, Tiger's obviously was an exception, but why you're not really seeing anybody run away as you did. I always hear a lot of the analysts always say, well, it's just because there's so many great players today. Yeah, but they're all swinging basically the same way. Whereas, earlier on, you had guys like Jack and they were playing golf. They weren't worried about, the picture perfect swing or how they
just said that.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
I do. I understand completely what you're saying. So here's how I look at the old-fashioned swings compared to the new swings, and that is, if you look at the older swings like Dad's or Gabe Brewer's or Miller Barber's or even Don January's or older gentlemen that are older than me but still not quite as old as Dad, like Couples and people like that, you've got some interesting swing dynamics. So with our older golf pros, Billy Casper and all of those in that ilk, or even with the mid-aged golf pros like the Freddie Couples, they had very long, wristy backswings. Yeah. Nowadays, the swings that we see on tour are usually right about the 10, 11 o'clock position, or a good three-quarter swing. And the reason they're doing that is because of what you just said. The swing mechanics they're taught to be perfect. Yeah. And they can, but guess what? The best players in the world can only control that with a three-quarter swing. And so the guys 50 years ago, they didn't have all the technology, and yet they had very fluid, full swings and still played golf the same way. So I would say that they had more talent because they used feel a lot more than the players nowadays do.
Well, and you're right. And one of the interesting things, and just to add to that a little bit further, your father, as I recall, won, 51 tournaments?
Yeah, he won 51 PGA tournaments. He won 11 senior PGA tournaments, and he won an additional 18 international tournaments with over 70 victories and 3 majors on the regular tour and 2 majors on the senior tour.
So we got a 5-time major winner crossing over 2 tours and 70-plus tournaments worldwide. So, he must have been doing something right. It may not have been
he's worth listening to, right?
Right, exactly. It may not be, by today's standards, the prettiest swing. And it brings me an interesting point. I mean, I'm 6'4". I'm probably 200-plus pounds now, but I'm still, fairly lean by some people's standards. And, I always had a very long backswing. And I can remember, I didn't work with a lot of, instruction over the years. My father was the one that taught me. And, he always said to me, let your sort of natural body movement and flow of your body sort of dictate how you swing the golf club. Don't worry about getting into, he didn't try to force my arm into certain positions. And it was interesting on the few occasions when I did, sort of seek out some additional counsel, if you will, everybody tried to shorten up my backswing. And what ultimately ended up happening, Byron, was my tempo would go off because it's not how I would naturally swing. And it created more problems. Now, I'm not saying that, I need to swing like, what's his name? God, I can't even think of him now. John Daly, as an example, or even a Freddie Couples. Mm-hmm. But my body type and style was a little bit longer backswing than maybe what you might see on tour today. But that's what worked for me.
But you just nailed it exactly, right? Because it's your body style. There was a test. There was a great article in Golf Digest about 4 or 5 years ago, and it talked about how there really is 3 planes in the golf swing, and how those planes they're not dependent on anything except really your body size, how tall and how big you are, because it makes perfect sense. And I used to work with Bob Toski years when I was first starting out as a professional golfer years ago. I guess going back about 25 years now. And I'll never forget what he said to me. One of the first lessons I had with him. And he said, "Why are you trying to swing like your dad? You don't have the same shape as your dad." Right. And it was true. I'm 3 inches taller than my father and probably 30, 40 pounds lighter. And so I was more like you, Ted, where I had the ability to be longer, a little bit more upright, and really fluid with my golf swing. Whereas Dad used his body correctly and was a little flatter and rotated his body around the ball. And so, it really depends on your body shape and your body style. And other than that, I think golf can be taught very much uniform across the board once you start with where that plane has to be, depending on what size of a player you are.
Yeah. Now, and well said, and that's exactly right. And I've always, when I work with a lot of my corporate clients, that's one of the things that I've always tried to instill on them is I don't try to, they'll say, well, I like so-and-so on TV. And I'll say, there may be some things that you can take away from that individual's playing style, but you don't want to mimic or copy exactly verbatim what that particular golf swing is, because it may not be. Like, for instance, again, I'm 6'4". For me to try and swing like an Ian Woosnam, who's considerably shorter than I am and a little bit more stout, just wouldn't make sense. Now, if I was to swing a little bit more of the lines of, say, a Nick Faldo, who is very mechanical but is more my height and body style, that would make more sense. And I think that sometimes, we've tried to put people into a box and one size fits all, and that's just not the case. Everybody's different.
The best way I learned to get around that is when I hear one of my students or one of my staff members that I'm helping with their game say that they say that they're built like a Don January, so they're built
right,
tall and thin, 6'5" and tall and thin, and their favorite player on the tour happens to be, let's say, John Daly.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to be able to draw some similarities there. Of course they are. Mm-hmm. But you're still going to have to put your own feel into it, and you're still going to have to find out how much rotation they have. And once you have the answers to those questions, then everything else kind of really falls into place. So I think golf really starts before feel and even before mechanics. Golf starts with an understanding of how much flexibility you have as an individual.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you, Byron, again, we'll go back to our discussion about Augusta. And I talked about earlier in Coach's Corner with the guests some of the questions here, but I wanted to get your perspective, and again, I want you to sort of draw from not only your own experience, but also from your discussions that you've had and things that you've seen your father do. But was it important for him, or do you feel it's important to sort of get out of the gate quickly at the beginning of a major championship like that? Or would it be more prudent to pace yourself at a course like Augusta, or does the conditions sort of dictate what you're going to do? In other words, if you're if you're off to sort of a rocket start, maybe you've strung up a couple of birdies, do you build on that momentum and go for it, or do you play kind of conservative in the beginning to make sure that you don't end up in a case like Ernie Els that finished with 80 on his first round? What did, in your thoughts, what should a player do, and what was your sort of dad's game plan when he came into the majors?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll talk from two perspectives. One, a caddy for my father, Billy Casper, on the tour and at the Masters, which I did caddy for him twice there, but also my own personal experience playing in Europe. The words "go for it" I find kind of interesting. I thought it was an interesting choice of words that you used a second ago. Because I think we're all going for it to a certain extent from Thursday onwards. Right. And I think that once you start that momentum, you're going to take advantage of it as long as it lasts.
Right.
So if you're going birdie, par birdie, you're going to get as many birdies as you can that day. You're not looking to hold anything back, but at the same time, Ted, you're definitely not looking to go for it or to take unreasonable chances. The day for unreasonable chances is Sunday, when you're 5 shots back and you don't have anything to lose. Right. Except for some low scores that you can sneak up the leaderboard. But on a Thursday, you're coming out of the gate. You want to come out strong. You definitely want your Thursday and Friday to be strong rounds. They don't necessarily need to be the lowest rounds, but they have to be strong rounds that keep you in the hunt. So that come Saturday, your mental aspect of your game is to where you still believe you have a chance to go and post a couple good scores over the next 2 days and finish in the top 10 or win. Right. And so I would say Thursday and Friday are strong days where you want to be strong in the field. You may not be taking undue chances, but you're still going to be really trying to go low. Saturday and Sunday are your days where you're going to take a few more chances. You're really going to try to go low. And Sunday, you're going to take more chances than ever if you're further back in the field because you have nothing to lose.
What about the leader? Do you think come Sunday, if Jordan's still in the lead, depending on where he is, on how much of a lead, does he begin to play more? If he's got a substantial lead, like say a 10 under, and maybe he's 6-7 strokes ahead of the field, does he play more conservative at that point to protect his lead? Or if he's, again, stringing those birdies together, does he just sort of keep going for it because he does have such a commanding lead? Or what would the strategy be at that point, you think?
Well, you have to get inside their mind when they're that low. And, it doesn't matter who you are, Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy,
right.
Jordan Spieth. If they're playing that well and they've got a 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 shot lead going into the back 9 on the last day of any tournament, including Augusta, they're going to certainly be aware of their game, but they're going to be so focused and so in the zone that they're going to be hitting shots as powerful and as close as possible without really even trying hard. As you know, once you get into that area
yep.
Where you're playing well, golf doesn't just become fun; it becomes almost the easiest thing on the planet to do. Everything flows, and so if you're already in that area, which I would argue you would have to be in order to have that much of a lead, then you're going to just be playing your normal game. You're not going to be holding anything back, but you're not going to be making stupid chances, taking stupid chances either. You're exactly right. Well said. What did your dad do, Byron, in a situation, and this was a question I posed to the panel earlier, and I'm sure there were courses or even holes that your dad came upon that maybe just didn't fit his eye or didn't fit his ball flight particularly. How did your dad handle courses or holes like that when it didn't particularly suit his natural ball flight? It's interesting. It really depended on how he was playing. I suppose that's how it is with all of us. But it really depended on how he was playing. I remember being up at Lake Tahoe at a senior event, a Champions Tour event. I remember there being a par 3 that ran along the side of Lake Tahoe, and so Dad would take his ball and he'd aim out towards the dock, over the water, and then bring the ball back in.
Right.
And so he was playing really great right then, and so he wasn't worried about control or anything like that. And yet, in the very same, type of situation, but 30, 40 years previous, when he was playing at the Olympic Club in San Francisco, he laid up 4 days in a row in the middle of the U.S. Open on a par 3. Chipped up and sank the putt, made a par 4 days in a row, and also won it that year.
Wow.
And so he understood that if he hit the ball within a deviation of a yard or more, that it would bounce into the trap behind the green, and that was a really hard up and down for him. So he played the percentages. The percentage was he could knock it in front of the green, chip up, make the putt, and he got a par out of there. And he got it 4 days in a row.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, and that again goes to why there's such a big difference between the amateurs and the professionals. Everybody looks at it strictly. The amateurs look at it and say, well, if I was a good a ball striker as so and so, I could shoot better scores. But really, it has nothing to do with ball striking. I mean, if you're a decent ball striker, but you're a great player and you're a great thinker around the golf course, you can post some incredible scores. I mean, you may not win the Masters tournament, but you can post some incredible scores on your own golf course or in your own championship. But the problem, I think, with a lot of players, and I'm sure you've seen this yourself, Byron, is they're focusing so much on hitting that perfect shot, hitting the ball just perfectly every time, that they don't really think about where they want the ball to go, what they want to do, what's going to happen if it doesn't go how to recover from that. And, I look at it this way, and I've said this here recently. I look at golf playing a golf hole as having 4 factors to be successful. The first one is, first and foremost, is position. Then there's the approach. Then there's the recovery, if need be, and then there's your scoring. And I think if you look at a golf hole from those, now people might use different vernacular and different wording, but that's essentially there are 4 factors to playing your best golf, and that is position, approach, recovery, and scoring. And I think what made people like your dad was that they were masterful in all 4 of those areas.
Yeah, they have the ability to turn it on. And also, we can't forget that they have the ability not just to turn it on, but they also have the ability to I suppose hyper focus, for lack of a better word, because that's really what it takes. It's being able to focus when you're walking up the 18th. At Augusta or at Winged Foot or at any major or any tournament for that matter. But as you're walking up and you have thousands of people watching you and you stick that ball within 3 feet and make the putt, that takes a whole level of courage that I don't think people talk about enough.
Right, exactly. No, you're exactly right. I heard a player, and I don't recall off the top of my head who it was, but years ago said that they would rather be putting a 20 or 25-foot putt than standing over a 3-foot putt at a major to win the tournament, simply because if they missed the 25-footer but still got it reasonably close, that'd be considered a good stroke. Mm-hmm. But if they were standing over a 3-foot putt and didn't make it and ended up either tying or losing, that would affect them greater. Do you agree with that?
I not only agree with it 100%, I also think that it's something that, as a golf professional, when I've worked with students in the past, I always really like to point out that all of these stories, it's a false sense of hero worship that your amateur golfer has for a golf professional when they think that they're making 80% of their putts they're making that are over 20 feet, and that's just not the case, as you know, Ted.
Right.
Your average player, your average top player in the world, is only going to make about 80% of putts from 10 feet in. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it in that perspective, it really opens up your eyes as to, like you said a moment ago, the 4 components that need to be on during a round of golf. That's every bit as important, because that's what's putting the ball in the hole. And so Dad always said, you can hit the ball great, but unless you know how to get it up and close to the hole and then get it putted in the hole, you're not going to be a good golfer, because you have to put it in the hole,
Right. Yeah, the interesting thing, and just to add to that, the interesting thing is I see so many amateurs, Byron, that, stand on the practice tee with their drivers and just, so focused on hitting those perfect drives out there, because I think that is what's going to help make them a better golfer. And they spend so little time on the rest of their game. They might go and hit a few putts or something before the round, but they spend very little time on chipping and pitching, particularly, and really honing in on their short game, because they don't find it as exciting, if you will, or as interesting. And this is another reason why handicaps don't come down, because they're really focusing on the wrong area of thetheir game. If you can hit it, 150 plus yards straight down the fairway, with a 5-iron or a utility club, you can play most any golf course in the world and shoot par. But if you're trying to force a 250-yard drive that's going 40 yards left or right and hoping of recovering out of the rough all the time, your chances are going to go down. So unless you've got a strong recovery,
yeah, exactly,
right?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
But I mean, weather comes into that too, and they're going to have that out at Augusta this week. They're going to have to deal with a little bit of weather. They're also going to have to deal with the greens getting a little faster, because the greens will speed up, and they'll cut them shorter come the weekend. And then on top of all of that, with the wind, the conditions, if it gets a little bit moist out there, and then the really fast greens, I think we're going to see maybe half a dozen players low, but I don't think we're going to see a lot of players low this week.
No, I think they said the projected cut was going to be +2, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Byron, it's hard to believe that the time's flying by here so quickly. We've got enough time here, but I want to take a few moments to give you an opportunity to talk about, because I know it's coming up here real soon, in just a little over a month's time, but your dad's annual tournament, charity tournament's coming up on, I think you said this year is May 16th. It's normally a little bit earlier in May, but for some reason it got pushed back a little bit. So it's May 16th of 2016, Billy Casper's tournament, and that's being held at the San Diego Country Club, benefiting,
Correct.
of course, his charity, Billy's Kids. So tell us a little bit about the tournament. What are you looking forward to this year? And then I just want you to briefly talk a little bit about some of the things that the charity does to help these kids.
Yeah, of course. So, Billy's Kids, or the Billy Casper Youth Foundation, was started by my parents over 20 years ago, and to help raise money for a high school group of kids here in San Diego, South San Diego. And from there, it's grown into a tournament that has, I believe we're in our 20th or 21st year. We've raised close to $4 million for children's charities around the world. We support groups like the Boys and Girls Club of America. We support groups like Junior Achievement, which helps keep kids in school and gives them careers to focus on that they are interested in. We work with hospitals, children's hospitals. We really do support every child that we can through charity organization, and so that's why we have why it's called the Youth Foundation, because the Youth Foundation is able to raise funds for lots of different youth foundations, or youth charities. And and so this year the tournament's going to be on May 16th. The website is billyskids.com. And please go and take a look at what we've done, what we're hoping to do as we continue to build this. Again, this dad passed away last year, so he's not going to be at the event. But it's going to be a memorial event, and will continue to be a memorial event for him because kids and their needs were hugely important to my dad, and they are very much so for my mom, who is still running the charity and the Youth Foundation.
Yeah, I remember interviewing your dad a few years ago, and of course, we talked about his book, The Big Three and Me, and some other things. But we came around to, as we are now, talking about the tournament, and you could really hear in his voice just the passion he had for this charity and how much it was important to him. That he, it wasn't just about another golfer giving back. I mean, many golfers give back, but he went sort of above and beyond that. It was important for him, as you just pointed out, to ensure that kids have a good opportunity out there, a good start to life by being involved in different activities and help where they need it, and be encouraged in many ways. Because I think when you have a good start like that, then the years that follow are only going to be better. And I just sensed talking with him, over the course of those 2 hours, why it was so important to him. And he shared a number of stories, with us at the time. But you could really hear the passion in his voice at how important the Billy's Kids Foundation was. And I think I might have lost our.
Sorry, I think I just got into a bad signal. But what I was saying is, I think that that it was important to him because of his own upbringing, because of the challenges and difficulties that him as well as my mother had growing up, and I think that's why they had a lot of children, and why they're very serious, and I always have been with regards to helping youth. Programs, youth charities. Anytime you can help a kid, it really is true what they say. The children of today are the adults of tomorrow. And considering that you and I are going to be old men when the children of today are the adults of tomorrow, I think we should all be a little nicer to them. But first and foremost, it's important to give back, as you said, but it's equally as important to have passion and to have a heart that is so big that wants to give back 24 hours a day. And that really is what my father was at the end of his life, more so than ever, was he just wanted to give back because he felt so blessed with the life that he had had. And, not bad for a kid that didn't have shoes until he was 6 years old to become the number 7th golfer in the history of the game of golf. Yeah. And that's a true warming story of what can really happen if you have a little belief in yourself and you have some good people around you that believe in you as well. So think about how many kids out there could use just that, just use somebody to believe in them a little bit right now. And so that's what we're trying to do with the Youth Foundation.
Yeah, and it boils down to mentorship as well. I mean, I think that, when you can, as he did, give back to the youth like that and give them a chance to, not just fulfill, but just to dream. I mean, kids today, I can't begin, and there's many adults too that just have sort of lost that ability to dream. Many of them are living in a fantasy world that's created through social media, and that they don't really know how, and they're afraid to dream because of so much disappointment in the world. And I think that the more that we can focus on these kids and give them an opportunity to dream first, and then to sort of be proactive and chase after those dreams. And everything's not always going to come to fruition maybe the way you want, but if you at least start with a dream, and if people are there alongside you to sort of encourage you and help you, you can literally move mountains, and your father has living proof of that. That's started from very, very humble beginnings, as you've stated, but was able to do and accomplish some great things. Did he accomplish every dream he may have had as a child? I don't know. Only he would know that. But he was able to certainly capture a lot of what he believed in himself, or was able to, through the encouragement of others, to believe in himself, and was able to then turn around and give that back full circle. And what a testament to a great man. And you're well on your way to fulfilling your own legacy, Byron. And it's exciting to be going along the journey with you.
Well, there's some really exciting things happening. I like to think that my dad's up there looking down and advising the universe as to what comes into my space. But I feel very very fortunate to be still keeping the Billy Casper Golf Academy idea alive and business alive. We're going to be expanding that in the near future to 3 different academy locations. And then on top of that, I'm very, very grateful to be working with a company like PHG, because PHG is I'm managing 2 golf courses for them, which are the courses that are in the prize,
right?
And the hotels as well are run and owned by PHG, and they're one of the few environmentally friendly, forward-thinking companies that it's my pleasure to work with, because they're trying to make a difference,
right? And
they're making a difference in not just society, with their youth programs and their charity programs, but they're making a difference with the environmental impact that their hotels and especially their golf courses are having. And so it's an exciting time to be alive in the golf world and in the world in general. And I love what you said a moment ago, Ted, about adults sometimes not having the ability to dream. Because if there's something I can say to everybody listening right now, and that is don't ever stop dreaming. My father told me that. And so if you want to take some great advice from Billy Casper, never stop dreaming.
Right.
Absolutely never stop dreaming.
Yeah, when you stop dreaming, you stop living, and that's true in so many ways. And again, sometimes things don't always happen maybe the way you would like them, but that doesn't mean you give up on your dreams. Dreams are there for a reason, and it just sometimes might take some adjustments. I want to very quickly just run through the contest again that Byron and I are presenting here through Golf Talk Live. It's a major champion, we call it, because it's wrapped around the majors. It's a couples contest or couples retreat, you can call it if you really want to. Here's what you get a chance to win. You get a night bed and breakfast at the Hacienda Hotel in Old Town San Diego. It also includes golf for 2 at the Salt Creek Golf Club. On your second night, of course, is again at the bed and breakfast at the Palm Mountain Hotel and Spa, and that also includes a golf or two at the Encina Golf Club, which you just mentioned are environmentally friendly. So we're always happy about that. To some great organizations that are trying to make a difference in the world. And for those lucky recipients of this couple's retreat, if you will, get an opportunity to meet Byron himself, son of legendary Billy Casper, and have lunch with him at the Old Town Tequila Factory. And he's going to be hosting you there.
Perhaps a tequila tasting or two.
And if you survive lunch and you think you can do some tequilas as well, by all means, Byron will help you navigate down that pathway as well. And he's also going to be throwing in a copy of Billy Casper's last book, The Big Three and Me, and I can assure you it's a great read. Some great information there. As I said, the prize, just a little over $1,000, so it's a great package. We're very excited to bring it, and here's all you have to do. It's real simple, guys. I'll give you the email address in just a second. We want you over this major and the next three majors, the U.S. Open, the Open, and the PGA Championship. We want you to predict who you think the winner will be. Send an email and include your full name, your contact information, who you think the winner of this weekend's event, the Masters, is going to be, and who you think the winner of the U.S. Open is going to be, and the Open, the British Open, and the PGA Championship. Who you think the winners are going to be. You can send an email for each event. The deadline will be the Friday, so tomorrow night for the Masters. You must have your entry in no later than midnight on Friday. And again, for the U.S. Open, British, and the PGA Championship on that Friday of the event at midnight, you must have your entry in. And the email address again is golftalklivecontest@gmail.com. That's golftalklivecontest@gmail.com. So send your entries in. You can do so right now. Pick who you think is going to win the Masters. You're welcome to pick for the other three majors as well if you want to, but it's not necessary. I would suggest do the smart thing. This calls for a little strategy. Enter your who you predict for the Masters tonight or tomorrow by midnight, and then wait as we get a little closer, see who's playing in the U.S. Open, and by Friday on that midnight, and then so on and so forth through the other four majors. And if you're lucky to get any one of them guessed correctly, you will be entered in for the draw, which will take place the following Thursday, the first Thursday that follows the PGA Championship, which I believe is in August. So whatever Thursday, I don't have the date, I'll make sure that's put up there. But the first Thursday after the PGA Championship, we will draw a name from the hat of all the winners, and a lucky couple will win the first inaugural Golf Talk Live Major Champion Couples Contest, presented by yours truly and, of course, Mr. Byron Casper, and the great folks at the Hacienda Hotel, Salt Creek Golf Club, and the Palm Mountain Spa. And I'm going to put up their website links as well, Byron, so that folks can go and check out these great facilities.
That's great.
And again, thank you, Byron, for joining us tonight on Golf Talk Live. Always a pleasure. And Byron is going to be joining me on the Thursday eve on the U.S. Open, the British Open, and also on the PGA Championship, and then again the week following the PGA to announce our winner. So put your thinking caps on. You have until midnight tomorrow night to submit. That's golftalklivecontest@gmail.com is where you send your submission. Byron, appreciate it as always. Thank you very much. And
totally my pleasure, Ted.
Yeah, I look forward to having you come back on many, many times. And I will talk to you beforehand, but you'll be back on the Thursday eve of the U.S. Open. And have fun watching the Masters this weekend.
Well, and you know what? I hope you have a great time watching the Masters too. And I'll leave you with two thoughts, both of which are from my father, Billy. The first is don't be like the chronic golf cheater who marked a 0 when he got a hole-in-one.
Yeah.
And two, keep your head down and follow through. And that's good advice in just about every walk of life. So, so thanks for your time today, Ted. Look forward to being on with you again. And happy golfing.
And don't forget, go to billyskids.com to get more information, not only about the upcoming tournament on May 16th, but also to pitch in, maybe donate, and give back, as Billy did for many years through his great foundation for the Casper Foundation. So go to billyskids.com and do what you can to help some great youngsters out there fulfill their dreams. Again, thank you, Byron, and I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Ted. Have a great evening.
All right. You too. Bye-bye. Okay, that was my very special guest, Byron Casper. Had a great contest that we announced tonight and talked a little bit about Augusta, and also a little bit shared some thoughts of his father, the late Billy Casper. I want to thank all of those supporters of the program: Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide, Meredith Currt from Meredith Currt Golf, Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, Nikki, a great teacher professional, Mr. Bernie Pinder from Ontic Golf, Sean Kelly from linkedgolfers.com, and Mr. Peter Doyle from Doyle Golf Solutions over in Ireland. Thank you very much for all your continued support and sponsorship of Golf Talk Live, and particularly thank you to all of the listeners worldwide for faithfully tuning in to Golf Talk Live each and every week. I certainly have a great amount of pleasure and enjoyment of having a number of highly talented coaches, teacher professionals, and authors and entrepreneurs stop by the show, and it's really through their participation and guest appearances that make to help Golf Talk Live a first-class show. I will be posting on social media and be reminding you each and every week about the current contest, and I will be putting that up tomorrow on Facebook and through other social media, so you'll have all the details and the rules as far as participating in the first Golf Talk Live Major Champion Couples Contest. So thank you very much, everybody. God bless, and I will see you next Thursday right here on Golf Talk Live.